You have questions? We have answers. Welcome to the Therapist Question Box with your host, Miss Lindsay Schiss.
Welcome back to another episode of the Therapist Question Box. We are here to tackle your tough questions, so ask away. As a reminder, you can get on the Therapy Utah website and ask questions there. You can also go to our podcast page, and if you scroll down, there's a link, and you can ask questions there. And we are open to any of your questions, so please ask. That's what makes this podcast awesome, is we can engage with you with trained therapists and help you with your questions. So today we have Mary Lamas.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice to have you, Mary.
It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Mary is one of my favorites. She's a therapist at Therapy Utah. And Mary, since it's your first time on, I want you to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, okay. So I've been at Therapy Utah for almost a year, and I love it. It's amazing there. But also, I just have different areas of specialty that I've been looking into. Historically, I have experience working with sexual trauma. I have worked with law enforcement families and support groups in that respect. I've worked in...
Is that because of your own?
Yeah, yes. So I have a law enforcement officer in my family, and it's been really interesting to come from that side of it. And then I've also worked with substance use and people who are rehabilitating into society from prison. And so I've kind of worked both sides of that, and that's been really interesting. And ultimately, I would really like to end up in law enforcement support, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
But then along the way, and we'll talk about it, but I have kind of built this this niche practice with ADHD and that specific type of neurodiversity.
Yeah. So great. And that is what we're talking about today, is ADHD. And we had a listener question come in that we were trying to decide who to get to talk about this. And Mary, because of her specialty in it and some personal experience, I definitely wanted to interview you about this. So I will go ahead and just start with a question, and then we'll jump into it.
Fantastic.
Here's the question. How do I know if I actually have ADHD or if I'm just kind of a hot mess like everyone else?
I love this question.
Right? Just so honest, right?
Yes, it's so
like a
real.
hot mess. Come on. So I appreciate that. Yes. So I think it's a great question. Like, what, as I'm hearing that, I think, okay, how do I know if I have ADHD or if I'm just like distracted and overwhelmed or, whatever we think goes along with ADHD. So what are your thoughts? What are your initial thoughts when you hear that?
Man, so that really just strikes to the core of it, right? Because we all are like, well, we have this, but is it really that much or that bad? And I know like it's one of those terms that really gets thrown around a lot.
Absolutely.
Especially with like teenagers these days. My kids tell me I get tired of hearing about ADHD because everyone thinks they have it.
It's so true. I think because we live in the age of TikTok diagnosis.
Yeah, that's true.
People are like, oh, my ADHD or whatever, and
right.
I agree. So it's thrown around a lot.
Yeah. So ADHD really is, when I think about it in a broad scale, it really is a lot of things that most people go through, but we go through them with intensity, right? Okay. So I found out that I had ADHD.
I was going to say, you said we. I heard that.
Yeah. I definitely am such a part of that group. I didn't find out I had ADHD until I was 35 years old. Wow. And I was looking into it for my son, who it seemed pretty clear that he had it. But as I'm going through the symptoms and the ways that it manifests and things like that, I was like, oh, check. Yeah. this might be something.
Sounds familiar.
And then and then I kind of like zoomed out into some family members and stuff, and I don't want to diagnose anybody, but I think that there's a strong thread of that in my family. And
did anyone know that before? Has anyone been diagnosed?
No, extended family, but it didn't really come into my consciousness until then. It was actually my sister who works in education that said, maybe you should look into this. And I went, oh, duh. Yeah, of course he does. And as we were going down, I was like, oh my goodness. And then I thought to myself, there's no way I could have ADHD and not know it, right? But it turns out we are brilliant at workarounds. Yep. And so there are more and more people who are discovering as adults, most of them like I did, when their children are struggling and they're trying to find some solutions, they find out as adults, oh, hey, I had this, and this is why school was so hard, or this is why I feel like a hot mess all the time.
Right,
right. And that sort of thing. So yeah, we do, it's a lot of things like really, the thing that everybody goes to straight away with ADHD is inability to focus, right? You just can't pay attention. And we all have this idea, I think, as a society, we kind of jump to this 7 or 8 year old boy who's just bouncing off the wall.
Can't sit still in class.
And climbing the fiddle fig in the corner or whatever, yes. And it's fun and energetic, but also you need to take a breath after they leave the room. And that is true of some people, but that's definitely not a broad view of ADHD. So one thing that gets confusing for people is that it has been called a number of different things, and the most recent up-to-date in the diagnostic manual, they ended up taking ADD, attention deficit disorder, and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and they actually combined them into one diagnosis. So it's ADHD, and then your diagnosis kind of specifies what kind of presentation you have, whether it is hyperactive, inattentive, or mixed presentation.
Okay, so everybody across the board, it's ADHD, not ADD anymore.
Yes. And it's really common. You tell a therapist you think you have ADD, they're gonna absolutely know what you're talking about. But technically, that's what we're dealing with. Yeah. And the hyperactivity side, that is more of what most people think when they think of ADD or ADHD, where they're just bouncing off the walls. They cannot calm down. They cannot focus. They're kind of all over the place. And it happens, right? But there's also inattentive, and actually girls get diagnosed far less than boys because they tend to present with inattentive symptoms. And so these are, we call them the dreamers, right? When you're talking and they're looking at you, but there's definitely a disconnect in their eyes that are glazed over, and they're imagining what their next invention's gonna be, or what would it be like if I had 7 fingers, or whatever, But, but yeah, just it's the same kind of inability to focus, but the presentation is just really different. Yeah.
And the way that I think that's really important to understand, because boys, it's a lot more obvious. And I know these are broad strokes, and we're kind of saying, generalizing, but that boys, maybe there's more that hyperactive, and so it's a lot more obvious. Whereas girls kind of mask it with the inattentiveness, right? In general, right? I think that's an important thing, because it can go unnoticed, right? Or undiagnosed, as it did with you, right? And it's interesting you say that, because I had a very similar experience when I went with my child as well, and went through the criteria and went, oh, check. Okay, maybe I also qualify for this, right? And then thought back, oh, it's interesting. When I clean the kitchen, I get so distracted. I'm all over the place, right? It's I start cleaning the kitchen, but then I notice that there is a lid to a pot. And then I think, oh, but that pot it's like when you give a mouse a cookie, right? And I start down one thing, and then I'm going down, and I'm, the pot, well, then there's got to be soup, but then, oh my gosh, I wonder if I have the celery. And then I check in the fridge, and then I notice the fridge is dirty. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so I've had to clean the kitchen now and just say, okay, I focus on the countertop, and I go from one side to the next, and I have to do that. Otherwise, I truly have a hard time finishing.
Yeah, but that's a really fantastic example of the workarounds that people with ADHD come up with, because we understand that to function the way that we need to, we have to do these things that don't come naturally to us. Immediately, you find the pot lid and go, oh, well, I need to this and that. And then you end up working all day and not getting anywhere. And everybody does that. But with ADHD, it is very consistent, very constant, and there is a lot of mindfulness involved in, no, this is my system. We put systems in place to remind us to do that. So you have, no, I go from left to right in this area, and then I do this. I have different piles that I put in certain places that, like, you know, I know if I go upstairs, I'm going to get distracted, so I'll put it on the stairs, and then when I go upstairs, I take that, those kinds of things. And, and there's a lot of workarounds.
You know, when you said that, it's so interesting, systems. I'm not a systems person, but when I learned about systems, I thought it was this new language that I was like, oh my word, if I can have a system for things and I just can go through and check, then I'll be so much more effective. And the truth is I am.
Yes.
But I think that's why. It's because then it just keeps me focused on one thing.
And that brushes up against a big part of ADHD is black and white thinking, which again, everybody has, but you'll notice, especially with kids in black and white thinking, they are so solidly in that black and white thinking. And developmentally, kids take a while to kind of develop gray areas anyways. But people with ADHD, we really struggle with vagueness. I tend to be pretty straightforward and blunt and have learned how to ask nicely.
I was going to say, I agree with you. It's one of your, it's a strength.
But it hasn't always been polite, you know what I mean? But I wanted to be very clear because something is maybe not obvious to me if it's in a little gray area, or if it's a go by how you feel, or like people that can cook by just like tossing in a little bit of this or that. This is not my world, right? Like some people can do that with ADHD for sure, but that's not my world. I want it to be this much of this. And so that can be a big struggle, especially for parents when they're like, I mean, come on, you know what I mean. But really, sometimes the kids don't. And it's very, very helpful to find a way to say things very straightforward. In a very straightforward way.
So if you do have a child, let's start there. If you feel like you have a child that has ADHD, what do you suggest? Like when you're talking, you're giving some tips, like be straightforward. Like what other things would you suggest for a child? Because, you know, I think what I have noticed is you can manage it, but at some point it starts to become problematic and really can be detrimental to self-esteem. And can start to really feel damaging. Like I am not okay. I'm not enough. Something's wrong with me. I can't do school well, whatever. So if you think that there's a possibility, what are your suggestions if you're a parent?
Oh, that's so much fantastic content in there, because with that black and white thinking there comes black and white emotions also. So if you'll think back to when we said girls especially tend to be more inattentive presentation, then that becomes, people go, man, why can't you just focus? What is in your head? You just daydream all the time, like you don't take things seriously. This isn't important to you, that sort of a thing. And it is really easy to go to that. So it's very common with kids with ADHD that they think they're lazy. And they can think that everybody has a negative inner critic that shows up from time to time, unfortunately. But with ADHD, we also have this intensity of feeling that really just pours gasoline on that fire. So you'll ruminate on things. You know, we've all said the stupid thing at the party, right?
Yes, we have. Yes. But you're saying they ruminate on it.
But like they'll think about it. I can tell you what I said at the party when I was 8 years old.
Really?
And I will still be back in that moment of, I'm so dumb, right? And again, like that is, people can do that, but we go over and over it and can't really make the feeling lessen without some good skills. So for parents, I suggest learn what you can about ADHD. It is really overwhelming at first. There's a lot of different schools of thought, but really what your child needs, what every child needs, is for you to deal with their strengths and try to help them address their weaknesses. So that telling a kid with ADHD, go clean your room, they have executive functioning issues, which basically executive functioning is just being able to go, I need to do these 5 things, and you kind of put them in a mental list in your head of the priority, or what would I start with, you know, okay, so I need to clear off the counter before I wipe it down. But ADHD, that is not as strong, and sometimes it's almost missing. And so you put them in a room and say, clean it up, they have no idea where to start. So giving them specific...
Is that because it's overwhelming? Like, what is
Yeah,
it? Why?
it is. It's overwhelming, but it's just that executive functioning isn't wired the same way. So we don't do things in steps. It's just that thing. Oh, I'm thinking of this right now, so I'm going to do this right now. And then it can jump around, but there's not something inside that naturally breaks it down as easily. And that is different levels with different people.
Okay.
And it's fortunately a skill that you really can build a lot.
So if you're a parent, you're saying, okay, go clean your room.
Yeah.
You're saying, okay, now let's break it down into step 1.
Yeah.
We need to walk in and get everything off the floor.
Yeah.
Step 2, we're going to have a garbage pile and a giveaway pile. I mean, I'm really trying to say, like, okay, what would it look like?
100%. So different systems for different families. But if you can show your child something, that is really helpful. Body doubling is something that a lot of people with ADHD do, which is really just having someone do the same thing next to you, which sounds so obvious and weird. But there's this whole field of people that get paid to do body doubling.
Okay, explain that to me. So if I'm a parent, I'm like, we're going to pick this up. And this is what, like I'm actually showing them. This is, we're picking it up and it's going in the garbage.
And you do it once, right? You don't have to do the whole thing because you also have a really smart kiddo who's like, oh, okay, Mom, I can just like kind of go slow and let Mom do it.
Exactly. This is working out well.
But right, I show them. So honestly, at one point, and it was before I knew a lot about ADHD, I realized, they don't know what clean looks like, what my expectation looks like. So I took a picture of a clean bathroom, and on the back of that, I wrote, I typed out, and it was like laminated. It was a little much, but it was to clean the bathroom. Declutter the counter, take everything off the countertop, and then spray this, and then wipe it down, and then and it's like a step-by-step thing, so that I didn't have to, because I was so frustrated feeling like I had to babysit everything they did, and that doesn't make them feel confident and effectual, and it doesn't make me happy because I have to stand there, and it would be quicker for me to clean it myself. So
we all know that as moms, like it's just easier to do it myself, and so I don't want them to do it, right?
So lists are a good job. Lists that aren't too detailed.
Okay.
But the more specific you can make things, the better for a while. And then they develop the skills. Now, my 10-year-old with ADHD, I can tell him to go clean his room, and he mostly understands what that means. He probably needs a little bit of prompting from me.
Yeah.
Okay, did you also do your room? Did you hang up your clothes? That sort of a thing. But for the most part, he can understand that. But that's after doing the lists, and here's what the morning looks like. You need to do these things, and
totally. That makes so much sense. And as you're talking, I keep thinking it's really tricky because, as you're saying, I break it down. Let's say this is an older child and you're talking to them about cleaning the bathroom and they're 16 and you're breaking it down. Like, how does that not feel like you think I'm an idiot? Why are you telling me to do that kind of stuff? Right? Like, how do you do that and honor, their autonomy, their independence, where they're at in life, but still recognize that this is a neurodivergent person that maybe needs some additional help. How do you do that?
Well, I mean, that's unfortunately going to look different in every home, right? But I think for me, I go into, because I have 2 kids with ADHD, one of them more inattentive, one of them more hyperactive, and I have the same struggles with each of them. And we do have these moments where maybe I'm not a super great therapist mom and I'm not communicating well, but I will also say, you know what? It will help me a lot if we have this system in place because my brain kind of needs this structure. So we're going to do it like this. I'm sorry if you feel like it's super simplistic or, talking down to you. That's an easy way for me to do that. But I don't know. We keep an open conversation about neurodivergence in our family, and that really has fluctuated. My kids have had different levels of believing in ADHD or being willing to consider it or things like that, and that's fine. We go with that. But I believe in their ability to develop workarounds, but I also know that when I give them tools like a list of things that are hard for them to list, then that is empowering to them. And I know as an adult, when I've started a new job or something and it's a little bit vague, I get real nervous that I'm going to do something wrong because I don't have this super strong gray area. I like things to be pretty black and white. It's a lot easier.
Isn't that true though? Black and white, it's easier, right? The gray is like, well, then I have to make decisions and I have to like manage things. Like black and white, it is or it isn't. It's right or it's wrong, right?
Yeah.
I always think that with clients, like, oh, black and white thinking is an easier way to think. It's also a thinking error.
Totally.
But it's easier. Being in the gray requires you to be agile and to manage a lot of nuance that you may not feel comfortable managing. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
So one thing I'm curious about is how does it show up differently in children than adults?
Children, it's usually it's usually more obvious, right? Because they just haven't developed those workarounds and those tools yet. Any adult with ADHD, I promise you, has figured out like your left to right kitchen thing, right?
Yep.
I need to do this in order to succeed at this. So I need to have 16 alarms on my phone every morning.
I'm like, have you seen my phone?
Yeah.
Because that's what I do, yeah.
So that I can make sure I get up and get out the door on time. Otherwise, I will be late. Yep. And I mean, that takes a level of being real with yourself. And you can internalize that as, I'm lazy and don't know how to function. And so I have to do this thing and it's ridiculous and I'm embarrassed about it. And everyone has sort of things like that. Or you can say, I have this and I know that this will help me succeed. And you can just do it.
And also, I think, what if we turned it and said, actually, look how adaptive my brain has gotten. So like good. There's this neurodivergency. There's this thing that is not quite working, like the quote neurotypical person.
Yeah.
So look at what my brain's done. Like, this is how I've worked around it. Congratulations.
Yes, it's
like,
very fascinating.
It's amazing, actually.
To listen to clients and the different, just incredibly intricate systems that they make that works for them. Yeah. Right?
I remember being in school and sitting and thinking, I just have a hard time sitting and just focusing on my assignments. And anything, it was like squirrel everywhere. So I would set an alarm on my phone and put it outside of the room. And until that alarm went off, I was not allowed to leave my seat. Yeah. And that helped me, again, just focus and stay present and get done what I needed to get done.
Yes. Right? That's beautiful. And that's actually the same system I recommend to a lot of parents.
Okay.
And it's
for their kids.
Yeah. Okay. And it's the same system that I used when I went back to school was, okay, I can sit here in this chair for 20 minutes. And there's nothing that needs immediate help that can't wait for 20 minutes. You know, kids switch that up. But yeah, that's a helpful thing. Back to your question about how do you tell with kids, a lot of times adults who are looking at kids with ADHD, they do think that they're lazy or super obstinate. They can be very obstinate, but that goes back to that black and white thinking, right? Is that, wait, no, the rule is this. So how is the rule not this in this particular case? And that is difficult for them, and they'll argue about it. And they're really passionate about it, too.
Yes.
They have strong sense of justice and sense of right and wrong.
Which are great skills.
They are.
But as a parent, that can be really challenging. Like when you said, look for their strengths, I thought, absolutely. And can we also just say, like, parenting a child with ADHD can certainly have its challenges.
So much, yes.
Right?
Yes, completely, yeah. And it is, I mean, it's like any other difference. It presents differently in different families, in different kids, and there can be a lot of things that go alongside of it when they hit the teenage years, things like that develop. But it is I call it a very hopeful disorder because actually the interventions for it are so effective. There are so many ways to grab your brain. You know, when you have ADHD, it's so hard to pay attention, especially when you don't care about something. So I have a spouse who is a lovely, wonderful, smart person that I'm sure hid this from me until after we were married, that he loves comic books, right?
Oh, boy, as you do. You got to hide a few of those things.
Yeah, right?
I'm sure we all do.
We all have them. Right. But I do not care about comic books. But I care about him. And so I have workarounds for listening about the comic books, right? But the things that I am interested in, I almost cannot get enough of them. I hyper focus on them. And that is such an amazing skill to channel in your child. And pointing them in the directions of their interests. They do have to develop skills in order to be able to function in life and in school and that sort of thing. But that hyper focus is incredibly motivating, and I always suggest to parents that they use that in their home, in their reward systems, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's such a great reminder that, you know, we think of ADHD as distractibility, right? So distracted, but actually the opposite is true. It can be hyper focused too, right? Just on something that's motivating for these people, right? It makes perfect sense.
Yes.
So when you say that, it makes me think of this, and we've talked a little bit about this, and I want to get your take on it. I was doing some research about this in preparation for the podcast today, and I was reading and hearing somebody say, I don't call it a superpower. It actually makes me so frustrated because this has been a challenge of mine for my whole life, and it has affected my whole life, and it's been hard. And yet I have heard you say it's a superpower. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's an interesting take, because I would say in the ADHD community that I've tried to be a part of in the last several years that I've known I have it, we do tend to frame it that way. And that's an interesting take, that is not desirable for some people. ADHD can be really hard. Like I said, there are these messages inside of you that go over and over and over again, and they tend to be around the things that we can't do easily, can't do well. For example, I have a really hard time being on time to things. I always have. I do not try. I go out of my way trying not to be late, and yet somehow there's always a thing, right? And I get really embarrassed about that. I don't think that it is responsible. I don't think it's a good trait to have, but I have it. And I tend to constantly beat myself up about it. And when I learned about some more therapy tools in regards to ADHD, I learned, you can beat yourself up about it, but it doesn't do anything for you. So let's get those systems in place, and let's get that positive talk. Okay, what went wrong this time, and how can I kind of turn that around? And that is a skill that my 2 ADHD children are amazing at.
Really?
Yes, it's been so helpful to be able to, and I heard one of them talking to the other day in this magical moment, because they have different kinds of ADHD, so they really butt heads a lot sometimes. But
ironic, right?
But, right?
Yeah.
But one of them said to the other, okay, what happened that was upsetting? And what was your part in that?
Wow.
And what can you do? What could you change that might help you and the way that you're feeling and the way that you're talking to yourself around this? And it was this magical moment.
I was going to say, but take a picture of that. That's amazing.
Yeah. And it's right. So it's the reframing of it, because it's easy to get into your head about the negative parts of ADHD. But I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't take it away. My favorite things about myself have to do with ADHD. I'm extremely creative. I'm friendly. I'm easy to talk to most of the time.
You're fun.
But I love to have fun. Both of us love to have fun.
That's actually true. That's how we get along.
Yes. And it's a big part of my life, and I wouldn't take that away in order to be able to sit through class easier.
Yeah.
Because I think, we all have parts of our character that we need to do workarounds on or do work on. And
so true.
And the gift of being able to really connect with people and the importance of fun in my life, that really is a big part of my life that I love about myself.
So for you, it is a superpower.
For me, it is. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And I'm kind of sad that there are people that feel like it's not. I can sure empathize with how hard it can be.
You know, I think also the point of when I was reading that is that if there's a lack of resources or education around it, it can be so challenging, right? Because it's like anything. When we have a diagnosis, it's like, oh, it makes sense. Yeah. Okay, now what are the resources? What can we do about it? But if there is if there's not resources to draw from, if there's not means, or education, then that is challenging.
Absolutely.
So that makes sense, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. If I don't know I have it, then I am just lazy and chaotic and late to everything. Yeah. And, and that's not really how I feel on the inside. But look at the evidence. That's what it's telling me.
Isn't that the truth? Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So if you were to say, it's a diagnosis that actually is really treatable.
Very.
What would you say are the most effective treatments? So
this is something that's interesting. I have people in my life come to me and say, I just got diagnosed with ADHD, or I think I might have ADHD. And it is really a struggle for them to wrap their minds around it. And it's like this feeling of there's something wrong with me, right? And I felt such relief when I got my diagnosis, because there was a reason. This is black and white.
It made sense.
It's in this manual that this is okay. And now I can understand how my brain works. And treatment looks different for everyone. We all have different opinions and values based around medications and therapy and different kind of interventions. So I never think that there is one way to do that. And in my own family, we definitely started with behavioral interventions. So I joined some, Facebook groups and Instagram people that I follow that have ADHD that just had some good information about it and kind of gave me a starting point. And then,
are there any that you could give our listeners that come to mind?
Yes. So CHADD, CHADD, is the national I'm going to butcher this, organization around ADD. And they have therapists that are specifically trained in ADHD, and kind of other neurodivergence. And there's a lot of information on there.
That's great.
And then honestly, I just Googled where I live and ADHD and found some mom groups.
Awesome.
I found some, just kind of playing around with what feels good. Because a couple of those I joined and they were just like, nope, you have to get medicated. You have to get medicated. You have to get medicated. And that doesn't sit well with me. I don't believe that every person has to be medicated. If you have a value that is, deep within your identity that you don't take medication, then you shouldn't. It's not going to be the same level of effective anyways, because you're just going to feel bad about it. So there are I think that the mixed approach is that's what I've seen be the most effective. Mm-hmm. And for me, I tried behavioral things for about a year, and then I thought, and it was interesting. I was on a lot of different medications for other things like anxiety and depression. And when I started ADHD medication, all of a sudden I went, you know what? I think what I thought was anxiety and depression might have been ADHD. And I ended up stopping a few of my medications.
That is fascinating. Yeah. And because it was presenting as anxious or depressed, but it's in fact and so the ADHD medication actually, it negated some of those things. It was okay.
And for me, when I started medication, that felt like I was able to calm the chaos and step into myself and really use those strengths as strengths and be more forgiving of the other things. But I also strongly encourage parents, especially, to help their kids have these, the impulsivity is real. We just want to buy that thing right now or do that thing right now. Right. And it can be a lot of fun. It can be really, really nerve-wracking for parents in particular. But teaching kids how to just stop and take a beat and really just kind of think that through to the end. If I do X, what are the possible outcomes here? That takes care of a lot. And it really gives kids tools to deal with that impulsivity, with that inattention. Another workaround I see a lot with kids is It is really hard for kids to listen to someone talking and talking and talking and not wander off in their brain.
I mean, is that hard for you? I mean, that's hard for me.
Yes,
let's be honest.
Very.
Yes.
And so
even adults.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So it's very common for kids with ADHD. That's why like fidget toys are now a thing for a lot of kids that they'll do, which is, it's just a little toy. It's not something that's stealing their imagination away and making a story around it necessarily, but it's keeping their brain occupied enough that it's not searching for something else to put in there. So I can sit and listen to a lecture for an hour if I have this thing going in my hand that needs a little part of my brain, or doodling.
Yes.
Or I used to love, I don't know, I was a weird kid. I really liked like quotes, and I would write down, I had this book of quotes that, you know, I would take to
some kids have fidget toys, some kids have quote books.
Yes,
I mean, it's fine, whatever. No judgment, Mary, it's fine. But I do think that's a reminder that like, it's not that they're distracted. Actually, that helps you pay attention.
Yes.
Is by doing something else with your hand,
Yeah.
you know, your hand, so your brain can focus on something
and
else.
it's finding the balance of this thing doesn't need all of my attention, but it needs enough of it that my brain isn't searching for something else in the background to pay attention to.
Totally. It makes so much sense. And again, I think it goes back to when you know more about what's going on with yourself or your child or, you know, a loved one, a friend, you do better.
Yeah.
You know, and instead of going, gosh, they're just lazy, or boy, they can't pay attention, or no, actually there's something going on there. And this is their adaptive response, their workaround, as you've talked about, that has actually enabled them to be successful in this arena.
Yes.
As opposed to, gosh, they just never want to pay attention, or they go to clean their room and it never works. Like, actually, let's just take a step back, right? And one of the things I love that you said was, look at their strengths. Like there's so many strengths that we can find with people with ADHD and in ourselves, right? If we think we maybe have some tendencies or have that diagnosis. And to not focus on the fact that, oh my gosh, I'm never on time. Yeah, I can't figure out how to get there. It's so frustrating. Okay, wait a minute. What's going on for me? And what is it, right? When you said, you know, it's one of my values to be on time. I am with you, Mary. I'm with you. I'm with you. And yet sometimes I think, oh, I will try to find 10 things. If I have 10 minutes, instead of being 10 minutes early, I will find 10 things that I can do, absolutely. Right? Because why would I waste that time? Right?
10 minutes.
Yeah. And then I'm going to be stressed right up until the second I get there. I have thought that so many times. Like, what is my problem? Some people just come early and just sit. I'm like, what would that be like? I don't even know. I don't even know. It would
maybe
be
we
incredible.
Just need to carry a fidget toy.
Yeah,
now,
maybe that's it. And then I'm like, I'll be doing something. So you never know. So so good.
It's so true.
So Mary, I just want to make sure, is there anything that you feel like, this has been such a valuable discussion, but anything you feel like that we haven't hit on that feels really important to you?
Yeah. So I would like to talk to you as a parent of kids with ADHD. I know it can be so difficult. That black and white thinking, they get to overwhelm really easily, and then they can lash out aggressively, defiantly. They can shut down really easily. That comes up a lot as symptoms in a child with ADHD, with adults too.
And can I just interrupt really quickly? Yeah. That is hard.
Yeah.
Like when for the child, but also for the parent. I just want to acknowledge that
100%.
Because again, as a parent who has a child with this, gosh, that's hard.
Yes.
Because you just see the behavior. Like they're defiant.
Yes.
They're lazy. Like, so I just want to acknowledge, like, this is challenging.
Very.
This is not just like, okay, yeah, so they're like this, so we just move on. No. That's really hard, right?
Yes, and I mean, people all the time ask me things about parenting and ADHD, and I remind them constantly, no, I'm a therapist. I study this. I do all the practical things I can, and I still have plenty of problems with my kids and these moments. But I want you to know, once your child they shut down or they lash out or something like that, there's a lot of shame there, and those negative thoughts come in. So trying to give them a break and let them just kind of sit for a minute, and they'll have different ways of calming down that you can incorporate with them and decide on those with them. Getting them involved in that decision-making process of what helps you calm down. That helps them identify exactly when they're getting in that zone the yellow zone and not jump over into the red zone, and then they can start articulating what they need. And as a parent, our kids, almost universally with ADHD, they love to be hugged. They love physical touch. This is why weighted blankets and weighted stuffed animals are helpful in ADHD often. They really like to be hugged, and just reminding them that you love them, give them a hug, not when they're in the red zone, but say, hey, I see you're struggling a little bit. Would you like a hug? I've been amazed at how often that has interrupted the whole process and set us back to a good place.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like hugs.
Yeah. Yes, hugs.
That feels so basic,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But also, let's just speak real.
Yeah.
When they're lashing out, it's maybe not the first thing I want to do is hug them.
Completely,
right?
yes.
Or when they're shutting down, it's like, come and get, let's give you a hug.
Yeah.
But reminding yourself, like, okay, maybe this is they're having a moment. And also give yourself a beat,
Yes.
right? As the parent,
Yes.
like they're having a moment,
Yes.
and you can have a moment,
Yep.
take a breath,
Yep.
and recognize this is hard for everybody.
Yeah, it is. And
Yeah.
then when you come back to it, come back with that idea of like, hey, let's reset. Let's go from where we are and not have to hash every moment of this blow up out.
So good.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, a couple of things that I think are so valuable you talked about. You talked about so many things that were really helpful, but just the awareness, like recognizing that this is something that happens, and that it can be a superpower, and it can be a strength, and to recognize the strengths that ourselves or our children have that have this. I loved when you talked about systems, that when we can create systems, then it just helps streamline things,
Yes.
right? It
So
goes
much easier.
That black and white thinking, like, okay, this is what we need to do. We go through the steps, and it's so much easier,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I know I thrive on that.
Yeah.
I love the idea of behavioral modifications, regardless of how you choose to treat this, whether it is with medication, but behavioral modification is always going to be valuable, whether you choose to treat with medication or not, just including that, right? I love the idea of hugs. That feels so basic, but so great,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And then the reminder that these are not lazy people.
Yeah.
They're not trying to be distracted or trying to check out or be rude. This is a neurodivergency, and it can be managed. And again, how hopeful is it that it is so manageable?
Yes.
Right?
And in therapy, I'll tell you, doing very hands-on experiential things rather than sit and talk therapy is so helpful. The more you can show someone with ADHD, and the more they can see why also, it's just very helpful, and it's amazing. And the creativity there is endless.
Yes.
It's so interesting and amazing to see clients thrive in when they can just get these little things out of the way with some behavioral modification and some mindfulness, really.
You know what? I'm like, that is why we do the work we do, right there.
100%, yep.
Give people some tools, and then life changes.
Yes.
Things get better. Things get easier. Like, that's why we do the work we do.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yes.
Well, if you are living with ADHD, or you know somebody that is, remember, it's not about trying harder. It's just working differently. Recognizing that, again, this doesn't have to be a weakness, but it can be a strength when we recognize the goodness that can come and utilize the tools and resources that are available. Mary, thank you so much for joining us. Such an insightful conversation. I think so many people, the ADHD is a part of so many people's lives, right? This is not just this random thing. Like, it is very common.
Yes.
And I would be shocked if any of our listeners don't know people that are that have ADHD.
Yes.
I think we have it in our lives everywhere. So I really hope this was an episode, and I think it is one that is really valuable. And again, how you engage with it, whether it's you, your children, a family member, a friend with ADHD, and remember, share it with them. If you feel like it could help them, please share it with them, because this is information. This is why we're doing this, in hopes that we can get good information out there to help people. It's always helpful if you can like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, or if you're on the podcast streaming, to rate and review the podcast. We sure appreciate that. And again, remember to ask questions. That's the richness of this podcast, is we are getting your questions and we're answering them. that as best as we can with experts on the topic. So until next time, take care.